But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the Hasbara, it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Be kind to the guys in this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. And earlier when I was doing the language stream, we were watching a video about the Marathi language and it had some images of traditional Maharashtri cuisine in it, and it made me feel that I really needed to have a vindaloo, and I had one, and it was a wonderful decision that I made today, possibly the best one I made all day, and I'm full of well-being. And so now it's time to fuck that up by looking at whack shit said by fucked up assholes. But first, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole the past couple of days because of a question somebody asked on Facebook. So somebody was trying to get sources for a claim that seems to be going around that like 80 to 90% of Jews in the U.S. support the genocide in Gaza. And I was not sure about that, and I wanted to find out in one way or another, so I decided to do some looking. And what I found was interesting, actually, because what I found was that the studies that actually look specifically at Jewish opinion, or even make divide the respondent groups into those in a way that you could potentially look specifically at the opinions of Jewish respondents, they didn't ask. They literally did not ask. And so I wanted to share, and it sent me down an even bigger rabbit hole, and I want to share a bit of this with you first of all. Is what I found was there were two recent studies. One was by Pew, which asked about views of Israel and views about whether what they in their wonderfully unbiased language call the Israel-Hamas war is important to them personally. And it found 73% of religiously identified Jews had a favorable view of Israel in the abstract, which is all they were asked about, it's worth noting, and overwhelmingly considered it important to them, but there wasn't any question about whether they actually support what Israel's doing. There was a question about the two-state bogus solution, asking whether that could potentially exist, whether the language they use is whether a Jewish and Palestinian state could coexist peacefully, and that got 50-50 amongst Jewish respondents. Now, here's the thing, though. Pew used, for a while there, see, one of the troubles with polling Jews in the U.S., or kind of anywhere, is, one, it's a very small group, and that makes it very easy to bias your results. But the other is, the definition is not of who's a member of the group is not entirely straightforward. There are different criteria people use. Pew, for a while, had been looking at not just people who identified as religiously Jewish, who actually went to shul and all of that, but also people who were Jewish in other senses, who were secularly, whose Jewish identity was secular. This time, for some reason, they didn't explain why, they didn't. And the thing is, that means about half of the Jewish population of the U.S. would not be included in those respondents, as they wouldn't answer that they were religiously Jewish. So they didn't ask the key questions, interestingly. Now, there's another study that is like the only really specific study, the major specific study that's ever done of Jewish opinion in the U.S., and that is by the so-called American Jewish Council, which is a pro-Israel lobby group. And that's important. Now, the thing is, I pulled that up, actually, because I want to show you the questions that they actually asked in the 2024 survey. Let me make sure. Can you see that? Yes, that should be visible. So, okay, first question is, how serious do you think anti-Semitism is as a problem? Since October 7th, another anti-Semitism question. Okay, now this is the closest they get. There are two questions that almost ask the question that people are interested in the answer of, and that I would be very interested in the answer of, but they only almost ask. How important do you think it is for the United States to support Israel in the aftermath of October 7th? Now, the result there is it's 85% say it's important, but here's the problem with that. The problem, I can tell you this as somebody who used to administer surveys like this, not these surveys, but other public opinion surveys, that the way it works is when somebody is asked a vague question like this, where it's open to various interpretations, because somebody could take support Israel to mean rein in Israel's more self-destructive impulses, in the sense as, which is something liberal Zionists have actually been saying, that, this is actually hurting, that what Israel's doing is actually hurting Israel, and they think that's a bad thing, and I agree that it's hurting Israel, and I actually think potentially it's a good thing, depending on what comes of it. But when you ask somebody a question like that, and they say, what do you mean by support Israel here? Do we mean support what Israel's doing? Do we mean support them in a sort of critical way or something like that? The response that you, as the person administering the survey, have to give is, take it however you understand the question. Which is kind of a problem, because it means that you've got people answering different questions. So that does not actually tell you for sure. I mean, there are like two removes here. There's first of all, because it isn't, do you support what Israel is doing? It's, how important do you think it is for the United States to support them? They avoid asking directly there. Then we have we have a bunch of vague questions that can be used kind of to mean anything, really. Do you, thinking about now compared with before October 7th, would you say you feel more connected or less connected, or neither more nor less connected with Israel? And the plurality said neither more nor less connected. 40% said somewhat more connected. 45% said more connected or much more connected. Okay. And then, let's see, connected to Jewish identity. And then, this is basically it. Okay, a bunch of questions about feeling safe in the United States, but not actually. This one is interesting. Have you considered leaving the United States due to anti-Semitism to move to another country in the past 5 years prior to October 7th? During which we were also hearing that anti-Semitism was supposedly a huge problem from people who are anti-Semitic as fuck themselves. Hey Adam, hey Riveroon, how are you both doing? And 94% said no. Okay, this is has the genocide affected your personal or work relationships in various ways? How would you rate your knowledge of the history of the conflict? How would you rate your knowledge about the Jewish people's historical and religious connections to the land of Israel? And I'm going through these questions one by one. Knowledge of the history and modern expressions of anti-Semitism. Did you receive Jewish education about Israel in one of various places? As part of this Jewish education, did you learn about the Jewish people's historical and religious connections to the land of Israel? Did you learn about different perspectives about that Jews and Palestinians have about Zionism in Israel? Okay, so would you say, what's your opinion of the education about Israel you received? Like, did you think it was good? Do you think there wasn't any? Who would you most likely vote for? It's overwhelmingly Biden, not surprising there. Who would be better for the U.S.-Israel relationship? Whatever somebody means by that. Biden is the answer. Who would be better at combating anti-Semitism? Unsurprisingly, it's not Trump. Who did you vote for in 2020? Overwhelmingly Biden. Now, job approval in general. Now, here's the closest one, and this is another vague one that avoids. It can be used to insinuate an opinion without ever eliciting an opinion. And this is a pro-Israel lobby group. They are in the business of asking questions in a way that they can spin them usefully. How strongly do you approve or disapprove of the way President Biden is handling the Israel-Hamas war? And what's interesting about this, once again, is that this is actually a much vaguer question. I mean, yes, if you are following it and really paying attention, you know all this bullshit about working for a ceasefire and getting the aid in there and all that crap is a bunch of shit. But a lot of people bought that bullshit. A lot of people actually bought the idea that he was tirelessly working for a ceasefire. After February 2024, when he realized, or his handlers realized, that it was killing his re-election chances to outright, oppose one. So how President Biden is handling the Israel-Hamas war is a question that people can interpret very different ways. Now, it's worth noting there are other polls that will specifically just come right out and say, what do you think of the way Israel is conducting the Israel-Hamas war? And will ask straight out what people think. But they don't identify whether the respondents are Jewish, so you can't use it for Jewish opinion, unfortunately. And this survey does not ask it. And what's really interesting to me, though, cheesesteaks versus downloading. So, okay. And that is it. Now, the reason I said I went down a rabbit hole is I was curious, did the AJC ask different questions before? And the answer is they did. They have actually been paring down the questions that they've been asking Jewish respondents about Israel. They used to be they used to ask more specific questions on the subject. Like, they left off tons of these. Okay. I mean, one other question that you will notice they did not ask, but is asked in other surveys, not specifically of Jewish respondents, is like, what do you think of various political figures in Israel? Like, what do you think of fucking Netanyahu or whatever? So, we've got... This one also avoids really directly asking, what do you think of Israel? Do you like it? Do you not? This one asks a bunch of questions about, you know, so-called Jewish education, which is largely Zionist propaganda at this point. What's interesting is 50-50 answered that they felt that the education, the formal education they received about Israel, was primarily to make them better Israel advocates. It was 49-49. Like, so, what, 2% said they didn't know, I guess? Foster feelings of attachment, but they do not ask. So they also ask, how would you describe your family's attitude towards Israel? But the thing is, they do not ask here either, what is your attitude towards it? Okay, so more questions about Jewish education, and then some knowledge questions. When was Israel, the state, founded? 84% got it right, 1948. Who was the first prime minister? 49% got that one right, Ben Gurion, an absolute ghoulish fuck. During what war did Israel obtain the Golan Heights and the Sinai Peninsula? That's just their word, to avoid saying occupy. 65% said it was the 1967 war. Now, this is an interesting way they ask this. What percentage of the world's Jews live in Israel? Less than one-third to less than two-thirds or more. Which is an interesting way of doing it, because they avoid saying... You see, less than two-thirds is technically correct, but it insinuates that actually it's more than half. The correct answer sounds like it could be more than half, when in reality it's not. It's actually less than half. Most Jews do not live in Israel. Okay. Have you visited? Now here's an interesting one that also has been omitted in 2024. This is 2021 we're looking at. Using the metaphor of a family, do you consider Israeli Jews your siblings, first cousins, extended family, not part of my family, don't know? 46% say extended family, 28% in second place say not part of my family. And 1% say don't know. People, like actual closeness, they ask a bunch of questions like this. Here's another interesting one. So, which of the following relatives or friends, if any, currently live in Israel? Immediate family members, 12% say yes. Members of extended family, 45% say yes. Close friends, only 33% say no, as opposed to 67%. More distant family or friends, 58% to 40%. Most people don't know Hebrew. Okay, but what's interesting is that if you actually, other studies have shown that particularly the younger generation, you'll notice they do not break this down by age group. It is not broken down by age group. Serious polling organizations will publish their data tables, so you can look at the exact questions, you can look at the demographic breakdown of the answers, all that stuff. The AJC is not a serious polling organization. They're a pro-Israel lobby group. So they want to vet anyone who asks them for that information. So you have to email them requesting it. You actually have to tell them who you are, and they can decide not to respond or whatever. But other studies have done that, and they've shown that actually, when you look at the younger generation, like 30 and under, there is particularly less interest in Israel. With the under 30s, in one study, they were asked, would they consider the destruction of Israel, the exact words, a personal tragedy? And the overwhelming majority of the 18 to 30s in this study, this was in 2009, said no. And Norman Finkelstein said that was horrible at the time. He thought that was horrible. Well, of course we should feel bad about the destruction of a state. And it's because this was on his fucking liberal Zionist era that he's still in. Cheesesteaks versus down. Oh, that's right. They are both Pennsylvania teams. Right. True enough. But yeah, so they are specifically avoiding asking questions that would elicit any indication that there's any distancing from Israel going on, except at a very clear remove that allows them to spin it however they want, because again, they are a pro-Israel lobby group. So, and they also, in just a nod to transparency, took all of their previous surveys, well, nearly all of them, off of their website. So you have to go to like archive.org and various university archives to find most of these IAJC surveys of the past 14 years. Which I spent last night doing because I wanted to know like what questions they were taking down and when they stopped asking them, although they were very kind of careful even then. So anyway, there is no recent actual clear survey result asking and documenting the opinions of a representative sample of Jewish opinion on whether what Israel and the U.S. are doing in Gaza is actually a good thing or not. There is that actually does not exist. Now, Matt Miller, the smirking death, had, I think, what might be his first post-State Department interview. And I thought we might have a look at that. Among other things, he admits that, yes, obviously, Israel was committing war crimes all along, and he was not in any way confused about that, but he was speaking in his capacity as the mouthpiece for the State Department, so he couldn't possibly say it. And of course, he didn't ever consider the possibility of just quitting his fucking job. So I thought we might look at this a little bit to start out.
Hi everyone, Mark here. It is Monday the 2nd of June, day 133 of Trump's second term. Today, we've got a really fascinating conversation for you that I had at the end of last week. I was joined in the Trump 100 studio by Matthew Miller. He was the
Okay, let me get my chat window set up so I can see it while I'm watching this full screen.
He was the voice and the face who had to own and explain President Biden's foreign policy decisions.
Okay, here we go. We're skipping all this.
And I offer they will get. So let's see where that goes over the course of the week. But now let's get to my conversation with Matt Miller.
Well, Matt, it's good to see.
God, I mean, he looks so. First of all, it's good to see him. Like, who the fuck thinks it's good to see him? It is never, like, there's literally never been an experience of seeing him that I would describe as good. Because I've never seen him get his ass kicked.
Out of the press room, we're not sparring anymore. We're having an informal chat on Trump.
Well, I mean, it's fucking Sky News. You wouldn't have been sparring in the first place, let's be honest. God, now he's grinning even more. The grinning was one of the most unbearable things about this motherfucker. Well, it's funny that you mentioned this, because his current line of work is crisis communications. He is making shit tons of money off of the fact that he spun genocide for a year and a half.
Andrew, thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here outside the press room, not wearing a tie, not behind a podium. It's a much...
Yeah, God, I feel for him. He had to wear a tie. It's terrible. He's not wearing it. He's so happy. Like, this fucking guy. The fucking chit chat is so painful. Like, why does anyone... Why does anyone give a fuck how he feels about this?
way to have a discussion.
And not having to defend the Biden administration's policies.
Nobody had a gun to his head. Nobody had a fucking gun to his head. He could have quit. Plenty of people would have paid him money. Like, I've quit jobs for much less. We've all quit jobs for much less than this. I've quit jobs because they sucked. I've never found myself in a situation where I was being asked to justify genocide in real time.
Look, one of the things about being a spokesperson is you're not a spokesperson for yourself. You are a spokesperson for the president. And when you're not in administration, you can just give your own opinions.
Yeah, but you could have just... Other people in the State Department resigned in protest over the various cover-ups that occurred and just over what the U.S. was doing as a whole. And he just stood there the whole time with the fucking punchable face that he has, smirking into the camera and saying just complete bullshit.
And you feel that you're kind of pretty free to do that now, yeah?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Well, you were the State Department spokesman from 2023, I think, until the end of Biden's term. But before that, you were a key figure in Democratic Party politics for many years. You worked under Obama and in different...
I mean, what I find interesting, I mean, he's talking about not wearing a tie, how he's glad to... is... One of Yahya Sinwar's things that he would regularly sort of do in interviews with the press was talk about how much he hated having to wear a suit. Yeah, he would say that, like, the Hamas political bureau people forced him to put on a suit jacket, and he absolutely hated it, and so he would do this thing where he would take it off, because, as he said, his preferred outfit would actually be a tack vest. And the thing is, and we actually know, he had an opportunity to put his money where his mouth was on that, and it turns out, yeah, he wasn't lying. That was totally legit his, where he preferred to be. But this motherfucker talking about, ooh, I don't have to wear a suit now. It's like, fuck you, man. Like, you should be having to wear a fucking hair shirt.
And Democratic Party campaigns as well. We'll look forward in a moment to the past few months and to what you expect.
Look forward to the past few months? I'm not sure that works.
Years of the Trump administration, but I want to look back first. Big question, but what went wrong for the
Yeah, exactly. Various fairly senior people in the Biden State Department resigned in protest and blew the whistle. And pointed out, like, that, yes, of course the State Department knew perfectly well Israel was blocking access, even U.S. humanitarian aid they were blocking. And since that came out, there was this whole expose on Israeli state TV where it turned out that, yeah, actually the Biden administration had specifically told them to withhold that aid because it might end up in the hands of Hamas.
Democrats. Was it the economy? Was it immigration? Was it Gaza? Or was it Biden's age?
I think it can be all the above and also some other things as well. I think, first of all, you have to look at the macro trends, and that is that in democracies all across the world after COVID, you have seen income.
What is this after COVID? Is he a time traveler? Did he come from the future to torment us? We are not after COVID. It's year 6. It's worse than ever. And a study recently came out that turns out when schools across the U.S. Ended their mask mandates, it killed 20,000 kids. Straight off.
Parties routinely thrown out of office. And so I think the Democratic Party was already going to face enormous headwinds in running in that environment.
Yeah, because they suck.
On top of that, the inflation, what that did to the economy, the challenges that posed to the president, is a high hurdle to overcome. And then, of course, Biden's age was an important factor in the election.
Did you believe he should run?
Well, had I not been inside the government, had I been outside the government and acting kind of in a political role, of course, I would have wanted to have a better candidate test. Most Americans.
I mean, it is wild just how many people are have like at this point just admitted, yeah, obviously he was a horrible candidate. I mean, people could have told them that.
Look at him and thought, this guy's too old to be president. And
Also, he just
of course, that was
sucks.
true. Didn't mean he couldn't do the job, but you would watch him in press conferences.
Well, I mean, look at the job that he did, though. I mean, he did a like Nuremberg-worthy job.
And when you watch him as a supporter, you're watching him thinking, I hope this goes well. I hope he delivers the message. And you realize that most Americans aren't doing that. Most Americans are just watching and kind of cringing at those moments that, of course, become famous over time.
It wasn't just most Americans.
You
who
mean
were
like the
watching.
moment where it was like fucking, as people in Gaza were starving, though not as badly as they're currently starving, because they still had some kind of food stocks that hadn't been exhausted, where he was licking a fucking ice cream cone talking about, yeah, maybe there'll be a ceasefire in a couple of days, and of course there wasn't.
And cringing. I mean, I remember that moment, I think it was in California, where your boss, Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, was watching, you know what I'm about to say, don't you?
Exactly, yeah.
Right, so he was watching President Biden speaking about Xi Jinping, the Chinese president.
Yeah.
And Biden
Oh,
was
I thought
asking-
this was going to be the one where he talked about how he kicked Medicare's ass, but I don't remember where that was, except that it was the debate.
question, do you think he's a dictator? And he said yes. And Blinken's face was just, I mean, it was a picture. He almost put his head in his hands.
Yeah, that's one you can't explain away. It's obvious that he reacted at the moment, that the president had said something that was going to make the secretary's life more difficult. I think Blinken would.
Like, I don't give a fuck about how difficult any of these people. Their lives should be way more difficult. It's literally a good thing. Yeah, I mean, like, because their lives, first of all, are some of the easiest lives of anyone who has a life, and also because they suck. Like, what they've decided to do with this one life they've got is some of the worst shit you could possibly do with it. So yeah, make it more difficult. I hope he suffered. I hope that he relives that shit, if that is the worst thing that he can think of.
I'll also tell you that he worked for Joe Biden for many years, worked for him as a senator, and the two things can be true at once.
I'm going to skip this because I kind of don't give a fuck about this part.
And people in the White House had just made a determination and then acted to keep that information from the American public. That would absolutely be a cover-up. I've seen no evidence that that's what happened.
Oh, okay, I'm kind of curious with.
Think about it. I don't think a cover-up is what happened. If there had been, say, a medical diagnosis.
This. Yeah, I mean, cover-up is the wrong word, because the thing is, most people were well aware of it and considered it a problem in 2020 already.
Is that the president was incapable of performing his job, and advisors, when there would be a disagreement over policy or a disagreement over political judgment, and they would be trying to convince him something that that's something that he didn't want to do, and that answer that the president would often give them would be, "How many votes did you get?" He was extremely sure of his political abilities and his political judgment, and he based that
Oh
on
God,
the
yes.
terms-
I mean, and that is the thing, and not just with them. I mean, I remember very early on somebody said, well, you know, universal health care is kind of popular, isn't it? Maybe you should run on that because we want to beat Trump, and that would be important to beat Trump, so this would really kind of clinch it. And he goes, no, people voted against universal health care. I beat Bernie Sanders, which, I mean, no. That's not actually really how that worked. And also, nobody likes him for him. But he's very convinced that people actually like him for himself, which I don't think anyone does.
Politics and the fact that no one around him had ever won an election to any kind of office.
Let's talk about foreign policy, because clearly that was your focus.
I mean, okay, finally we're going to get to the bit that I actually was interested in.
Your time at the State Department. Like, it was also has been Joe Biden's focus for many decades. Trump's right, isn't he, that as president, with hindsight, Biden was a disaster for America's foreign policy. I'm thinking, you know...
Oh, I mean, I have to say, as somebody who thinks that U.S. foreign policy deserves many disasters, because it's like the only way the world will free itself of U.S. imperialism. Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think that is actually true. Somebody I was watching, it may have been Greg Stoker, was saying basically the U.S. has burnt all of their soft power at this point, because like who's going to take them seriously when they talk about human rights, looking at what they're doing in Gaza? And I think that's exactly right. I think like this is an extremely self-destructive genocide both for the U.S. and for Israel, except they're both stuck in a sunk cost fallacy. That is what I think is going on here, because both of them have to actually deal with the fact that if they back down, they are very much admitting defeat. No matter how they try to phrase it, they are very clearly admitting that the Qassam brigades and the resistance axis and Ansar Allah, who forced at least 2 weapons shipments, planes carrying weapons shipments to Israel, to do U-turns this past week. Watch John Elmer's resistance report on the EI live stream from yesterday. He shows them on one of these flight tracker sites. It might be Flight Tracker 24, but they actually made fucking U-turns because Yemen was targeting the Ben Gurion Al-Lid airport. But you know, if they admit that they have, if they admit defeat at this point, you know, they could have said, okay, we're imposing a moral red line on ourselves sometime in late 2023, and it would have still kind of worked as propaganda. But at this point, that doesn't work. Nobody will buy that. Nobody will buy that for even a second. Everybody will know that the reason they're doing it is because Israel's falling apart at the seams. They've lost more than half of their fucking armor. And the Qassam brigades are winning on the ground every time that there's any kind of confrontation there. And so it's admitting defeat. But then if they admit defeat, then they're losing their deterrence. And they consider their deterrence to be the most important thing they've got. Like, how the fuck are they going to dominate the region if the Qassam brigades and the poorest country in the region, Yemen, can force them to tuck tail and run? So they are going into this despite the fact that it is actually self-destructive for them as well, because they cannot countenance the idea of admitting that they've actually been forced into a corner, and it's too late for them to pretend that they're making a moral case. So it is a genocide due to a sunk cost fallacy is where I am at this point. That is what I think is going on, and I think it is fucking both, and they're both completely fucking themselves at the same time as they're doing just unspeakable atrocities in Gaza and the West Bank.
The withdrawal from Afghanistan, Ukraine, okay.
I mean, the withdrawal from Afghanistan was actually like one decent thing.
Did manage to get a great degree of unity on with Europe. But, you know, comments he made, like, it depends, he said about Putin, it depends if it's a small incursion or a full-scale invasion. I mean, that was a disastrous thing to say. Putin knew he could get away with it under Biden, in a way that he knows he can't get away with it under Trump.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, is he getting... he doesn't seem to be getting away with less at the moment.
I think you will not be surprised to hear that, no, I do not think it is fair, and I don't agree with it in any way.
But he did invade Ukraine when Biden was president.
He did invade Ukraine when Biden was president. He did invade Ukraine when Trump was president, because I think he believed that eventually he would get what he wanted from Trump without having to...
Well, see, I actually doubt that as well, because Trump has actually historically taken the more confrontational anti-Russia positions. He has actually broken anti-Russia taboos that the Democrats were hesitant about, like arming Ukraine in the first place. So, I mean, I don't necessarily buy that, but there's not really... But the idea that, you know, Russia is, like, backing up at this point, I don't see that.
Launch a full war.
He wouldn't have got Ukraine.
He might have gotten pieces of it, or he would have gotten it with a much different war where you didn't have the United States rallying the free world to come to Ukraine.
The free world, shut the fuck up.
I get the sense that in a lot of areas,
what free world?
People I speak to, former officials like yourself, you kind of feel like you ran out of time if you had just a few more months?
So with Ukraine is, I think, a little different than the other ones, although it's true with respect to Gaza too. But in Ukraine, it wasn't just a question of running out of time. It was also that Putin was in no way going to enter a serious negotiation with the balance of the U.S. election in question. You can say a lot of things about Vladimir Putin, but one thing, he's not as stupid, and I think he knew and.
I'm interested in you say that because, I was saying a things, and I don't know my mistakes. We got the sense from you, your persona, what you're having to say as spokesman.
Hi, GM.
You didn't really care as much as some people did about what was going on. I kind of wondered at times whether you were seeing the same images that we were seeing daily. Were you?
Okay, here we go. We're talking about Gaza, which is what I wanted to be what I was interested in seeing. I saw clips of this on the EI live stream, and I am proud of myself that my screen is intact because
absolutely we're seeing the same images. And
yeah. I mean, and let's just say they're almost certainly seeing all kinds of horrible shit we're not seeing. The idea that if anyone has this idea, I don't think anyone in chat, anyone watching this has this idea that people in the White House just don't understand what's going on. Wenn das der Führer wüsste. Oh, das wäre dann ganz anders. No, that's not how any of of course they knew exactly what the fuck was going on.
Okay, so we're seeing other images that you probably didn't see. I can tell you, just speaking for myself, but it's true about my colleagues in the government, the effect of that war was crushing. Crushing.
And yet you kept your fucking job.
Look at what was happening to children every day in that war. And I did speak about this.
What was happening to them? We don't know who did it. It just sort of happened. The earth was just swallowing them up or something. I mean, maybe it was a giant slur. I don't know. The
number of times from the podium about how difficult it was as a father, personally speaking, to watch what was happening in the war.
Yeah. God, this reminds me of this is part of what I actually watched. If you read, Rudolf Höss, who was featured in the movie The Zone of Interest, he was the commandant of Auschwitz. When he got arrested by the Soviets, he wrote a memoir in jail, awaiting trial. And in this memoir, he talks about how crushing it was to watch everybody going to the gas chambers. He says at one point, "I wished I wasn't there. I wished I was any other place." And it's like, motherfucker, you're you're one of the very few people in here who has any kind of fucking choice in the matter. Shut the fuck up about how hard this is for you.
And so I think there are places that you can criticize the policies that the United States chose to pursue and
yeah, you mean like the murdering of the children? Oh, I'm sorry, the happening to the children?
Legitimately, whether we could have pursued different ones.
One thing that we know, for example, that they could have pursued and definitely didn't. This was also on this Israeli expose that was on, where. The Israeli ambassador to the U.S. at the time said, yeah, at no point were we ever told ceasefire now. He actually said we really ought to thank God that Joe Biden was president because he never once exerted any pressure on us to end this. And he said you can't take that for granted, which any Israeli official would know is true because, Reagan put that pressure on. Bush, too, put that pressure on. There have been various times when that pressure was put on and Israel immediately steps back. So, yeah, I think maybe there were some things you could have tried.
One of
the things, one of the most memorable, maddening exchanges was Stan Lee from AP kept on asking him, are you using any leverage at all to get them to go to a ceasefire? And fucking Miller would be like, oh, we're doing the things, and the things are doing themselves, and we're talking to them, and we're making our position clear. What kind of leverage are you using? And he would not give a fucking straight answer, because the answer was they were not using any fucking leverage at all.
Heard from people who are criticizing us is what other policy they would pursue other than just stopping support for Israel.
What do you mean other than? That is the policy. Stop supporting this regime. That, yeah. I mean, Obama, it's worth noting, the first really big Gaza massacre was cast-led 2008-2009, and that ended the day before Obama was inaugurated, allowing him, after he won the election, to spend, the last couple of months before he took office dodging questions about it. Because he would always say, oh, well, there can only be one president at a time. I'm not going to express a view on this. Because at the time, a whole lot of people, sort of left-leaning liberal people were convinced. I remember this because I was in these discussions at the time, in like pro-Palestinian circles at the time, and a lot of people were absolutely convinced that he was gonna put his foot down on Israel. They actually believed that. They projected all kinds of things onto him that he never showed any sign of standing for. But because they shut it down the day before his inauguration, at no point was he president during it. And because he wasn't president during it, he did not have to express a view on it. He had an excuse not to express a view on it, and then it was over.
Which, yes, might have hampered Israel's war effort.
Might have. Like, literally, if the U.S. stopped sending them weapons, they would collapse entirely. They do not have to pay any money directly out of their budget. It is all done in a way that allows them to use the money that they will eventually be putting towards their share of the cost of U.S. weapons, on other stuff, like healthcare and infrastructure and all sorts of other shit. Like, literally, if the U.S. cut them off, they would be fucked. And they know that. They absolutely know that. Which is why if the U.S. even said, yeah, we're cutting you off if you keep this up, they would absolutely have to stop.
Not over the short term. Had a lot of capabilities to continue prosecuting the war. But at least in my judgment...
And that's absolutely not true. Like, because they were dropping bombs faster than the U.S. could deliver them. They exhausted their stocks very quickly. They have dropped as many bombs as have been delivered and then some. Like, literally, the whole thing would fall apart very quickly if the U.S. cut them off, because they don't have anyone to replace the U.S.
I know in the president's judgment, the judgment of other senior officials, would have left Hamas in charge and would have left us with an unstable security situation that would have endangered the lives of Israelis and Palestinians.
Wow, yeah, he's so worried about endangering the lives of Palestinians, I'm sure. He's so worried about endangering the lives of Palestinians. I wonder if anything else was going on that might have endangered the lives of Palestinians at that point.
But the alternative is what we're seeing continue to unfold, which is, what is it?
Fucking genocide. Yeah.
Now 60,000 dead.
I mean, it's way more than that. That's just the official count.
Talk about how we got there, because I think it's incredibly important, and it is a difference between the way that we pursued diplomacy with respect to this conflict and the way that the Trump administration has pursued it.
Well, I mean, in the sense that, for example, there was at least under the administration he was in, there was a 1 week fucking ceasefire, and the Palestinians at least got a month of respite from fucking genocide since January 20th.
So, in the last days of the administration, we were finally able to get a ceasefire.
They were finally able to get a ceasefire. That is so cute. They were literally the only obstacle to it. The deal that the U.S. accepted and Israel accepted, Qatar confirmed it had been on the table since December 2023. Like, literally at any time, if the U.S. had accepted it, this thing would have been over.
In effect on January 15th.
Sorry, I'm interrupting, but did that only come because of the Trump factor?
No, it didn't only come only because of the Trump factor, but the Trump administration was an important player in getting that. What is that? Actually happened?
No, well, yeah, and I think what that comes down to is that he wanted a honeymoon period, and he knew if this thing continued unabated, that he was not going to get it.
Is that after getting that initial ceasefire, the Trump administration basically walked away from the table. During that 6 weeks of ceasefire, you saw the president's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, who had been an important
Who now has a massacre named after him. Or a genre, really, of massacres named after him.
player in the first negotiations, seemed to get distracted and work on the Russia file instead, work on the Iran file instead. Both incredibly important, but it's extremely difficult for one special envoy to handle 3 of the most difficult and complicated crises in the world at one time.
Except that this one isn't complicated. The U.S. is the crisis.
I think they basically put Gaza on the back burner, and it's actually worse than that because it's not just that they did nothing, but through their actions and through the president's statements, they empowered the worst actors in Israeli society and in Israeli government.
Okay, so we can't possibly be talking about the ones that Biden was also empowering. Now I'm wondering, who are the worst actors? Because, it's clearly not Gallant, Ben-Gvir, Netanyahu, fucking Beelzebub, Ostrich. Like, who the fuck is he even talking about at this point?
I think you can overemphasize the damage that the president did with this proposal to move the 2 million Palestinians who live in Gaza out.
Which was not a new proposal. What he added his own horrible, signature touch to it. But, the mass expulsion was something that was already... In fact, Egypt, when they were approached very publicly by the U.S. government about accepting expelled Palestinians from Gaza, actually said, we had received this. This isn't the first time that the U.S. has proposed this to us. They also proposed this in early 2024. The difference is that time they did so privately, and this time they did it at a fucking press conference. At the time, it was called a humanitarian corridor.
And allow it to be rebuilt by the United States. Because what that did, it gave hope to the most extreme members of the Israeli government, and you now see those hopes being voiced by the Prime Minister himself.
You've been seeing those hopes being voiced by the Prime Minister himself since the beginning of this.
That ultimately they may get what some people in Israel have always wanted, which is to move every Palestinian out.
It's not looking like it, though. It is absolutely not looking like it. The Israeli military, now they're trying to move in again into Gaza on the ground, and they're getting smoked again. A lot, not a little, not occasionally, every fucking day.
You also saw the administration sit on the sidelines while no food, no water, no medicine went into Gaza for 78 days.
I wonder, wow, Matthew, that must be so weird to look at an administration that allowed Gaza to be starved for an extended period of time. I wonder how that must feel. What if the administration you were a part of allowed them to be starved for a year and a half? And would still be allowing them to be starved, except that they, there was an election.
I remember when we used to get criticized, and I think fairly, when 100 trucks a day would go into Gaza. Yeah.
Oh, he thinks it's fair. He thinks it's fair. That's so big of him.
Humanitarian assistance. And for 78 days, not a drop of food, not an ounce of water.
This is the policy that was announced by Yoav Gallant on the 9th of October, 2023. It's worth noting.
No medicine, no fuel to run desalination plants. Nothing went in.
They bombed the desalination plants anyway already.
And the Trump administration sat on the sidelines and didn't do anything about it. And I can tell you that is a completely different approach than we've seen.
That's bullshit. He's just lying here. Because that is literally the policy I mean, the first time that people in Gaza were facing catastrophic hunger, in fact, under his administration's watch, was the first time that the majority of people in the world experiencing catastrophic hunger were in Gaza. 80%.
What do you think of Steve Witkoff? I mean, honestly, do you think he is, he's the real estate guy from New York, he's not a diplomat, but he's having an impact.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it says a fucking anvil dropped from a height.
I mean, I talk to diplomats, government officials from Middle Eastern countries who specifically talking about their area, their arena. They say he does have an impact.
What does that mean, though?
I think he is an extremely capable individual, and
he's good at being an individual. He's very capable of being an individual.
And I know the people in the Biden administration who worked with him during the first negotiations for a Gaza ceasefire.
Wait, that is a very interesting way. They were working with him during the first negotiations. Now, either that means that he was involved in that, because remember, the official U.S. position has been, under the administration that he was the propaganda guy for, the State Department for, was that they were involved in these sorts of negotiations all along, basically since February 2024. So either Witkoff was there all along, which is a bit weird. Like, what was he doing there? He's Trump's guy. So that doesn't seem likely. Or he's admitting right now that the very first negotiations for an actual ceasefire that the U.S. seriously participated in were in January 2025. Hi, Adrien.
I thought that he was capable. I think at times he doesn't know what he doesn't know. And you see that especially in the negotiations in the war in Ukraine, where you see him go into a meeting with Vladimir Putin and come out spouting Russian propaganda. I think he would benefit from a little diplomatic savvy and some experienced diplomats around him instead of going into negotiations with the Russian president without them. But I do think it's extremely important, and I have personal experience traveling with a secretary who had this benefit, that when people sit down with an envoy of the United States, they know that envoy speaks for the president of the United States, and it is very clear that Witkoff has a president.
Yeah, I mean, and let's remember, one of the other big things that Witkoff actually bragged about was he told representatives of the Qassam brigades and of Hamas that if they, that in exchange for releasing Idan Alexander, who they had been willing to release in exchange for nothing, just as a further show of good faith on their part, in addition to all the other shows of good faith on their part. But he had said they release Idan Alexander, then the crossings will be opened and they will get aid. And he was lying. And he publicly bragged about the fact that he got one over on them.
An extremely valuable asset to bring to the table.
To that point, were there times when Secretary Blinken, the Secretary of State, your boss, was frustrated with his boss, with Biden, who had such a particular view of Israel? I mean, he described himself as a Zionist.
No, I mean, that's not exactly unusual for U.S. imperialists since 1967.
Were there moments where you and Blinken wanted Biden to move, but he wouldn't move?
Look, it is true about...
Yeah, okay, this sounds... I immediately get this feeling that he's about to lie. Because he's avoiding the direct answer. He doesn't just go right off into an answer. He starts with, like, look.
Every senior official in government, that they don't win every policy fight that they enter into.
I mean, look at the fucking smirk here. Like, motherfucker.
And what you do is you make your best case to the president, and the president decides. And the president is the only one who is...
So what he's doing here is he's avoiding actually giving any examples.
...by the American people to do this job. And you have to respect the president's authority to make those decisions and then do your best to implement them.
Sounds like there was a disagreement.
There were disagreements all along the way about how to handle policy. Some of those were big disagreements. Some of those...
And notice that now he's moved so completely. He was asked a specific question about the genocide in Gaza by somebody who has not actually acknowledged that it is one, as far as I know. And Miller himself has also refused to acknowledge it. And will not acknowledge it over the course of this interview either. Because I think he realizes that the minute he admits that, like under the Nuremberg principles, he is certainly criminally liable for his role in it. But now he's talking about very broadly, oh, we had policy disagreements. It's like, no, the idea, he knows that the question was to get at whether, see, if it had been up to him or fucking Blinken, the genocide might have ended sooner, and he does not want to say.
Were little disagreements when it came to the big ones. So, I mean, I don't think it will be a secret to know that the administration did debate at times whether and when to cut off weapons to Israel. You saw us in the spring of 2024.
I'm actually kind of surprised that they did it all, and it certainly, there was no sign of it. I mean, the answer seems to have been never.
Or stop the shipment of 2,000-pound bombs to Israel, because we did not believe they would use those in a way that was appropriate.
Oh, but the 500-pound ones, you felt that what they were doing with those was appropriate. You know, dropping them on the bomb shelters and the hospitals and the fucking tent encampments. You thought that was cool, but 500-pound bombs on tent encampments of refugees, that's fine. But 2,000 is going too far. Like, what the fuck?
In Gaza, and it was clear to us in that period that there was a time when our publicly discussing withholding weapons from Israel, as well as the protests on college campuses in the United States, as well as the movement of...
Oh, that reminds me. There was another very interesting thing I found when I was going through these surveys. See, the AJC, the so-called American Jewish Council, the pro-Israel lobby group, they didn't do a survey of Jewish opinion in general in 2023. But they did do a survey on anti-Semitism, which is something they do annually. And what was really interesting, and I think I forgot to mention this earlier when I was talking about this, is, see, unlike the general study of public opinion, they do break down those results by age group. And so they had a question there about anti-Semitism on college campuses, asking people, do you think that's a thing? Do you think that's a problem? And the one age group most likely to actually be on college campuses, the 18 to 25s, the 2/3 of them said it's not a thing. The other groups, who are most likely only hearing about this shit on television from people who are lying to them about it, are the only ones who said it was a thing, where there was a majority saying it was a thing.
From European countries to recognize the state of Palestine, all of which, appropriate discussions, appropriate decisions, protests are appropriate, but all of those things together.
Protests are appropriate. I'm so glad, chat, that Matthew Miller thinks that it's appropriate for people to protest the genocide he was a part of.
We're leading the leadership.
And is kind of still a part of.
Hamas to conclude that they didn't need to agree to a ceasefire, they just need...
This is, okay, now he's lying again, because they had already agreed to it. They were not the ones that were actually... They were not the stumbling block. It was Israel and the U.S.
Did hold out for a little bit longer, and they could get what they always wanted, which was Israel that was forced to stand down.
I mean, which would have been objectively the right outcome anyway.
Israel that was isolated.
Well, I mean, Israel is pretty isolated at this point. All sorts of countries, NATO countries, are either seriously discussing, or EU countries are either seriously discussing, downgrading or cutting off assistance to Israel, or they're already fucking doing it. Like, Spain's not going to ship them any weapons anymore. At least for now. It looks like the Occupied Territories Bill in Ireland, in the 26 county state, is passing.
And
possibly with a carve-out for trade in services, which is disgusting, because that is a big part of the trade.
Maybe a widening of the war where Hezbollah would come in Iraq.
What do you mean, maybe a widening of the war? Hezbollah came in, like, practically on day one. They were already in. Like, they were in October 2023. Like, what the fuck is he talking about? Like, the U.S. was desperate to find a way to get them out of it because they were trying to break the support front. They didn't like this dynamic where you had these other resistance forces and countries in the region who are specifically acting in solidarity with the Palestinian resistance and the Palestinian people. Like, what is he talking about? A wider war? Hezbollah was in it. They actually kicked Israel's ass. The only reason they're out of it is because Israel responds to military humiliation by murdering civilians, and they murdered thousands of civilians in Lebanon, and then they went begging for a ceasefire, and they eventually gave one because, a lot of civilians were getting murdered in Lebanon, and they wanted to stop it.
That got us to one place where I think everyone in the administration was united, and that was on this question of a ceasefire and the proposal that the president put forward at the end of May of 2024 that ultimately became...
the one that he claimed was an Israeli proposal. He was the first one to bring this proposal up. He claimed it was an Israeli proposal he had received, even though Israel didn't say anything about it. And then Israel immediately said, yeah, fuck that, we're not doing it. And the U.S. did not impose, and it did not put any kind of pressure, any kind of leverage in there to make them reconsider that.
The ceasefire that was agreed to in January. Now, the thing that I look back on, that I will always ask questions of myself about, and I think this is true for others in government, is in that intervening period between the end of May and the middle of January, when thousands of Palestinians were killed.
Tens of thousands.
Who didn't want this war, had nothing to do with it. Was there more that we could have done?
No, there was less, actually. If you had done less, they would be alive now.
To pressure the Israeli government to agree to that ceasefire.
I mean, yeah, the answer is absolutely yes. They could have actually put any pressure on there. Again, if you watched, and this was on Hamakor, which is an Israeli investigative journalism show that has also exposed some of the bullshit around the 7th of October. A lot of the investigations EI and Mondo Weiss and others have done into the 7th of October relies on stuff that Hamakor has also looked at and examined, and sometimes sometimes Hamakor has been extremely late to the game on some of these things, like exposing Rami Davidian as a complete bullshit artist. But in this case, they actually, they interviewed top Biden officials specifically on the Israel portfolio, and top Israeli officials whose job was to, liaise with them. This was in response to the Netanyahu government, and right-wingers in Israel love to claim that Biden was Hamas, which just a complete nonsense. Biggest fucking Zionist that probably that the U.S. has ever seen. But anyway, they pointed out there was never any pressure on Israel at all to stop the genocide.
I think at times there probably was. Now it's difficult. Israel was not the only what's the right word? Not the only party to this negotiation. You saw Hamas repeatedly move the goalposts, but you saw...
No, they didn't. That's actually, again, he's lying. In fact, Israeli negotiators who have actually negotiated with Hamas negotiators have said, going back before this, they are what is called principled negotiators. They say up front what their bottom line is, what's important to them, what they can't budge on, and that's it. And they stick to that. They don't play silly buggers and move the goalposts and fuck around. Like Gershon Baskin, who is a liberal Zionist dickhead, he has written about his experience negotiating with them, and he has said, yeah, they're straight shooters. They're people you can actually, you know, if they say something at the negotiating table, you can take it to the bank. And that has been true all along. If you actually follow their proposals, if you follow their responses to the U.S. proposals and Israel's responses and stuff like that, what you find is they've been extremely consistent on the things they said were essential from the start.
Netanyahu moved the goalposts as well. I do think there are times that we should have been tougher on him.
Do you think
Well, like at all tough, for example.
what's going on in Gaza now is a genocide?
I don't think it's a genocide, but I think I think it is without a doubt true that Israel has committed war crimes.
You wouldn't have said that at the podium.
Yeah, look, because when you're at the podium, you're not expressing your personal opinion.
Yeah, but the thing is, nobody was like holding a fucking gun to your head to force you to be at that podium. You could have stepped down from the podium at any time. You could have actually quit your job and then gone on, you know, and written written a fucking expose about the degree to, you know, which the fucking Biden administration was complicit in this genocide and actually an essential party to it. You could have done a million things. You didn't have to stand up there and run interference for it and do propaganda for it.
You're expressing the conclusions of the United States government. The United States government.
Well, not the. I mean, that's kind of a cute way of saying it, because the thing is, the conclusions that the U.S. government reaches internally and the conclusions that they will express in public are a bit different.
Had not concluded they committed war crimes. Still have not concluded that.
But your personal view is they have. And they were while you were.
I mean, they have actually concluded it. They avoid saying it. They will actually list the facts that are indisputably examples of war crimes, but they will not say that that's what they are.
But yes, but let me qualify that. There are two ways to think about the commission of war crimes. One is if the state has pursued a policy to deliberately committing war crimes or acting,
which they clearly have. I mean, they openly say, like, they're not even pretending at this point. They're not even being coy about attacking schools and hospitals and stuff. They are just openly attacking the civilian population. They've done that for a very long time.
Reckless in a way that aids and abets war crimes. And that, I think, is an open question.
No, it isn't. It's not an open question. Like, Israel openly admits it. I mean, in that sense, it's very open. Because Israel is very open about the fact that they are committing war crimes.
I think what is hard...
I mean, they're also very open about the fact that they're committing genocide. And that goes back to Netanyahu and Gallant in 2023, who just openly said it.
Well, certainly not an open question is that there have been individual incidents that have been...
Ooh, individual incidents. Oh shit, there have been individual incidents. It's like fucking tens of thousands of individual incidents. And strangely, you know the weird thing about all these individual incidents, chat, is that somehow the individual incidents, they're all by people who are in the same army and the same Air Force, and who are in the same fucking chain of command, and the people at the top of that chain of command look at these individual incidents and they say, yeah, that's great, do more of that, please. It's a really special kind of individual incident where it's actually just an official fucking policy.
That have been war crimes, where the Israeli military have committed war crimes. So ultimately, in almost every major conflict, including conflicts prosecuted by democracies, you will see individual members of the military.
Individual members of the military. And what is whether the government is elected or not have to do with anything? Because that's all he means by democracies, and probably not even that. Because, I mean, the U.S. calls things democracies that are just outright dictatorships. Like, I mean, his administration also, like, congratulated Bukele on his fake-ass illegal election, where the opposition wasn't really allowed to function. Yeah, so, yeah, like, that doesn't have anything to fucking do with it. Like, yes, elected governments commit fucking crimes against humanity. You should know you worked for one.
Militaries commit war crimes, and the way you judge a democracy is whether they hold those people accountable.
So, okay, so, judging from that, I mean, he's not being charged with anything. His bosses aren't being charged with anything, so... Yeah, I mean, it sounds like actually not doing a good job on the rule of law thing.
But Israel hasn't. That's my point, right? Is we have not yet seen them hold sufficient numbers of the military accountable.
Yeah, like for example, we haven't seen them hold one person accountable. And the thing is, even if they did, like charge one person, that person would have a pretty good chance of getting off because they would be following orders. You would actually have to try, if you were serious about it, you'd be talking about prosecuting generals and cabinet ministers, and that's not going to happen.
I think it's an open question whether they're going to.
It's not an open question. They've never done it. They're not doing it. They openly celebrate the fucking things. These individual incidents.
Really struck that you think now that Israel did commit war crimes, and yet at the time, and I get why, but at the time you were at the podium and you couldn't say that. I mean,
you could say, that's the thing. Like, they don't have some sort of fucking force lock on him or something like that. There isn't, like, if he could get up on that podium and say anything he wanted if he did not care what happened afterwards. I mean, he could get up there and say, "Hi, everybody, another fine day of fucking genocide brought to you by the government I represent. How's everybody doing?" He could do that. Nothing would prevent him doing that except the professional consequences of doing it. Yeah, exactly. A lot of people have presented that as a defense, and it hasn't worked very well for them. I mean, Cali at My Lai, the Nazis at Nuremberg, not a great defense. Like, I mean, this is just wild. Like, he could have said these things. He could have gotten up at the podium and said anything he wanted as long as he did not care that he was getting fired afterwards. And getting fired afterwards would be a small price to pay, and would probably be he would probably be rewarded for it. They would almost certainly be follow-on jobs, not necessarily as fucking well paid and prestigious, for somebody who actually made a public splash and said, "Yeah, this is obviously fucking genocide, and I'm done making excuses for it. I'm gonna call it what it is. You don't know the half of what I've seen. These motherfuckers are evil." And then just walk off, right off into the fucking sunset. There would, he would find follow-on employment after that. It probably wouldn't pay well, and the FBI would probably be keeping close tabs on him. But nobody was going to shoot him for that. He wasn't going to die. He didn't have any reason to fear for his life. There was absolutely nothing that would stop him other than him wanting to keep a job that consisted, to a great extent, in making excuses for genocide.
Personally, that must be very difficult. Well, the State Department itself had concluded, not in these, they didn't phrase it in these terms, but I think I did it the podium a few times. I concluded that it was likely that Israel had committed war crimes. But I do.
I mean, internally they had concluded that it was a fact.
It's almost certain that they have. How difficult was it for you personally? I mean, I know.
Oh God, we're gonna hear about how difficult it was for him personally. Like
the videos on Twitter, on X, of you going home and protesters outside your own house
who were way too nice to him. I mean, that's the thing. His name should be written in shit on every wall that he ever walks past. Like, just because he's out of office, this should not leave him. This should not leave any of the people. This stink should never come off them. They should not be able to go anywhere without people saying, "Hey, that's that genocidal fuck. How you doing, genocidal fuck? Why aren't you in prison?" That should be their life. That should be the rest of their life. It should haunt them forever. So, yeah, fuck off.
Stuff at you.
Yeah, just because you make excuses for one genocide and people get all fucking verklempt at you.
That must have been hard.
Yeah, it was hard, not so much for me, but because I have a family, little kids, right?
Wow, he cares about some little kids. Like, not the ones in Gaza that he was helping murder, but I guess there's some that he doesn't want them to know what a piece of shit their dad is, I guess.
Who don't have anything to do with this and don't deserve to have to.
I mean, one day they're going to know what a piece of shit their dad is. They will find it out.
Sneak out the back of their house to get into a neighbor's car to go to school so they don't.
You know, here's the thing, Matt. Yeah, that's terrible. You know, the same people that that made you feel so uncomfortable. If you just resigned your job very publicly in front of the mic and said what everybody knows is already true, what we're all already seeing, and just stopped the bullshit and said, yeah, I'm done with this. I'm not going to be making excuses for genocide. We all know what this is. I'm done with it. Good luck to whoever comes after me. But consider finding other employment because you're never going to be able to live with yourself if you're at all a decent person. Like, then he would be a fucking hero. Undeservedly, I would say. But, you know, he decided that the job he was in was more important than, like, doing even the most elementarily right thing.
I have to run a gauntlet of protesters. I know that the people who I think are hard to reason with this would say, well, that's nothing compared to what the kids in Gaza have gone through, and of course that's true. But
yeah, and you're directly responsible for what the kids in Gaza are going through.
It has nothing to do with my children.
Yeah, well, yes, it has to do with their fucking father. Like, he's using his children as human shields here. You can't buttonhole me and talk to me about what a fucking genocidal piece of shit I am, because I got my kids with me. See, they shouldn't get to know what an asshole their father is. And I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, it is fucked up for kids to have to know that about their father this early on. But the thing is, that is their father's choice. He chose to be doing this. Nobody forced him to do this. I mean, to get into the position where one of your job options is spokesperson for the State Department, you had options. There are a million things he could have been doing other than this. And they all would have been extremely well paid and extremely prestigious, and he would have had all sorts of nice houses and probably private schools for his kids. I don't know if his kids what kind of schools kids go to, but he could probably afford it. And he chose this one. And he chose it every single fucking day. Every single day of this genocide, he chose to go and make excuses for it and lie about it and all that stuff. And he's still lying now. Like, so fuck you, man. Like, I do. Fucking, we're supposed to feel bad for him. Shut the fuck up. And, well, I just noticed the time. And time flies when you're looking at one of the worst people. It is time for me to wrap up. Thank you for everyone who joined. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I hope it was interesting and informative and entertaining and maybe a little bit of cathartic to, like, watch me increase my, like, stomach acidity looking at this asshole. I will be back tomorrow night at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and I look forward to seeing you then. Have a good night, all of you, and fuck this guy.